Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, a cheeky promo to my wife's channel. She launched a new video today, in collaboration with another friend of ours. Over on our friend's channel, you'll see me and my wife, both in one video, taste testing food. It's a pretty funny video, well, to me anyway. And if you'd like to check it out, you know, for that face reveal and all, you'll find the link to both videos under the description. And I'd really appreciate it if you'd check out my wife's channel too. But anyway, without further ado, it's time to get comfortable. Make sure your windows are locked, and let the darkness take control. One evening, when I was 15 years old, I was at home alone. My brother was at a football game, and my mum and dad had just left to eat dinner out. I decided I wasn't hungry enough to warrant going out with them, and settled for them just bringing me home takeout. My parents hadn't been gone longer than 10 minutes. I was sitting in the living room on my laptop, when suddenly I heard the sound of a car door slam. I glanced at the clock in surprise, because I knew there was no way my parents were back this early, unless they forgot something and turned around. So I sat my laptop down and got up to go investigate. I gently pulled one singular blind down to peep out of the bay window in the kitchen that overlooks our driveway. It's twilight outside, so it's nearly dark, but still enough natural light hanging in the sky from the sun that I could make out a 4-door car, not my parents' car, parked alongside the flower bed at the top of our long driveway. It has shrubs and trees that you could park on the other side of and have trouble noticing a car behind them. As my eyes rested on the car, I saw 3 men. I'm assuming they were all men, because of their stature and size, wearing all black, and masks concealing their faces. All exit the car together and start advancing towards the house. One branches off to cover the front yard and thus the front door. The second branching off to go behind the house, which leads to the back door that leads into our garage, which leads into our house. The third guy, however, was cutting across the yard heading to the side door, the one which I was currently standing next to. I snapped my head back and let the blind fall back into place, my heart doing a flip. I took a split second to process where I planned to hole up inside the house, so I would have the best chance of escaping. I chose my parents' bedroom because it's on the main floor right off the kitchen, and right past the back corridor that leads to the garage. I knew it was also a risky place, as it had 2 doors right outside their bedroom, that 2 of the 3 seen villains were currently heading to. But I wanted to hear and know where my opponents were, the moment they entered the house. I nearly ripped their bedroom door off its hinges when I grabbed it and slammed it shut to lock it. I leapt across their bed and grabbed the phone and frantically started calling my parents. I called them first, because I'd figured they'd be right down the road and would turn around and make it to the house in time to scare these creeps. But they didn't answer. I dialed my cousin who lives up the road 2 houses away. Again, because of the same reasoning of him being here so quickly. During all of this, my frantic, panicked mind didn't even think to dial 911. I finally got my cousin to answer, as I started to hear bangs at the door outside the bedroom. I knew before my cousin suggested that I needed to arm myself, in case they broke into the house before he got there. I threw the phone down and took a deep breath before I slung the bathroom door open, knowing I was going to have to muster the courage to make a mad dash across the kitchen and grab the biggest butcher knife we owned, passing the doors on the way. As I passed by the narrow corridor that leads to the door connecting the garage and the house, I couldn't help but glance over to the door which had a window. There, I saw a man who chose to break off towards the back of the house. He had broken into the garage via the side door that leads from the outside to the inside of our garage. He was in my garage and staring at me just a few feet away, with only a flimsy pane of glass between us. My heart felt like it cut off. I had never had such a narrowing sense of dread in my life. I quickly whipped my head back towards the kitchen and bolted to the other side of it, throwing myself into the drawer and tearing through it to grab a knife. As I raced back towards my parents' bedroom, I could hear the man at the side door banging on it, and I could hear a guy banging at the front door, but no noise from the guy at the garage door. In that moment, I didn't care about anything but barricading myself in my parents' bedroom until I heard my cousin's truck. To this day, I'll never know what happened, but by the time my cousin got there, not 2 minutes after I initially called him, those guys were gone without a single trace. I didn't hear their car door slam as I did before. I didn't hear an engine crank. Nothing. But when I heard the familiar sound of my cousin's truck rush into my driveway, I mustered the courage to peek out of my parents' bedroom. I noticed none of the doors were open or had been forced open. When I realized I could come out, I went outside and found nothing. Cops had been called during this time. I'm assuming my cousin called them after hanging up with me, and I remember vaguely standing there frantically shaking with a butcher's knife still in hand. The cops, I could tell, were confused and possibly didn't even believe my story. In that moment, I even started to question it. I know what I saw. I know what I felt. The terrifying knowledge that someone was after our house. The paralyzing fear of knowing that you are about to experience hand-to-hand combat with a criminal. The heart-dropping, adrenaline-surging rush. All of it. It was real. Those men were there, and for whatever reason I will never know or understand. After the guy in the garage saw me, they decided to book it out of there. Maybe they didn't realize I hadn't left with my parents and had been scoping the place and thought we'd left. Maybe they didn't want to commit to the crime with someone home because they thought it would make too much extra trouble. Maybe they were fathers and couldn't stand the thought of harming a child. To this day, the reason as to why they chose to leave me peacefully are what haunts me just as much as the event itself. Either way, to the 3 men who bum-rushed my house when I was 15, let's not meet again. This took place when I was 12. I live in a suburban neighborhood. Our house is beside railway tracks. Because of this, teenagers will walk along the tracks at night and climb over the railings into our backyard. Most of the time they're only playing around or exploring, so there isn't much trouble with them. But sometimes more malicious people will come off the tracks. I was home alone when this took place. It was around 1:20, and it was very dark outside. I was watching TV in my room, and I heard my house phone ring, but I let it go to voicemail because I wasn't bothered to answer it. 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time I went to answer it in case it was urgent, despite the fact it was 1 a.m. When I picked up the phone, I said hello, and received no reply. I said hello again, but got no answer. So I hung up. It was probably a butt dial. When I went back, I settled into my room watching TV, and I heard a rattling sound from outside. I heard it again, so I looked out my window thinking it was probably just teenagers trying to jump over the chain link fence. Except there wasn't a group of teenagers. It was just a guy trying to get over the fence. He had a torch in his mouth, and I knew this was shady, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't call the police. I just watched him. I don't know what I was thinking. The man finally got over the fence. I couldn't see his face, but he was pointing his flashlight at various things in my yard. Everything valuable, such as bikes, were kept away in a locked shed. So I knew he would just get bored and walk away. But he didn't. He hung around in the garden for a few minutes and then went towards my kitchen door. From my bedroom, I could hear the handle on the back door being messed around with. My heart sunk as I remembered that I'd left my phone in the kitchen when I was getting food earlier that night, and the only other phone was the house phone that was downstairs in the hallway, so I couldn't call the police. I then heard him bang his fist on the door, but after a minute, he stopped. I looked out of my bedroom window and watched him jump back over the fence and switch off his flashlight. I watched my yard for a few minutes to make sure he was gone. Since then, I make sure I have my phone with me everywhere I go. I hate to think what would have happened had he got in. Let me set the scene. I live in the outskirts of a town at the end of a terraced house, and there are lots of houses in my area, in front and behind. I was home alone with 3 dogs. My boyfriend was over at his friend's, which was a 3-minute walk away. And this time, we didn't really lock the front door if one of us was in the house, but now I do. Nothing really happened where we lived. We had 3 decently sized dogs, and were a bit naive. And to be fair, I had recently moved in here with my boyfriend, and before I lived in a small village where everyone knew everyone, and you could actually leave your door unlocked. So I was sat in my pajamas, watching TV, with all the dogs next to me when the door knocks. It was around 10 PM, and I was in my PJs, so was a bit annoyed. I got the dogs off me, and walked out of my living room and pulled the living room door closed, closing the dogs in. Bear in mind it took all of 10 seconds to do this, and as I approach, the door swings open, and this man that I have never seen storms into my house and gets right into my face. There's also another man and a woman right behind him who don't enter. I was frozen in shock. Who the hell do you think you are? You think you can just run around here doing what you want? What? Don't give me that. Do you think I'm a muppet? I saw you and all your little friends running back into this house. I'm literally standing here in my PJs and haven't been outside. Okay. Do you think I was born yesterday? Well, you just walked into someone's house that you've never met and screamed at her, so maybe it wasn't her, man. Maybe. At this point, my dog started barking behind the door. The man stares at me for what seems like forever, but was more probable just a few seconds, and then walks out and slams the door shut. I was standing there shaking for a few seconds before I started to just get mad, when I realized what had happened. I lock the door and ring my boyfriend straight away, who gets home in about 1 minute flat, but the group was nowhere to be seen. I didn't want to call the police, because I couldn't really give my boyfriend a good description when he was asking. In the 7 years since, I have not bumped into these people again. Thank God. I now always lock the door, and thankfully, as we've had 2 other occasions where people have come late at night, but those are other stories. However, if it did happen again, I would like to think I would handle myself better now. I live in the suburban part of a small rural town in eastern Missouri, in a pretty quiet neighborhood. We've had 1 crime here in the past 3 years, and it was me who committed it. I'm a jaywalker, comprised mostly of elderly women and single mothers. We own 4 vehicles. My car, my mum's van, my stepdad's car, and my mum's old truck that's illegal to drive. I was home alone about a week after graduation, while my stepdad was at work. My mum was taking my youngest brother to the doctor's office, and my 2 middle brothers were at their friend's house, so I was lounging on the couch in my fuzzy robe and underwear playing Fallout. My stepdad is a professional chef, and he does 80% of the cooking at home. I have terrible anxiety and an addiction to investigation discovery. So whenever I come home alone, I keep his longest, sharpest knife either on my person or within arm's reach at all times. It may have saved my life or something. A knock on the door isn't too suspicious. We frequently get solicitors and Mormons in the neighborhood, so I wasn't too worried. Being a cautious person, I peeked out through the curtains just a bit to see who it was. I'd seen the guy around the neighborhood before, walking, and I didn't feel threatened by him, since if it got physical, I at least had 5 inches on him, and a knife. I went to open the door, figuring that at worst I could politely turn him away, tell him I wasn't interested and go on with my life. At best, well, he was cute in a generic way. So I opened the door, resting my hand on the back of the couch, where I've hidden the knife under a blanket, just in case. As soon as I open the door, I know something's off. I've got a blunted effect due to a combination of depression, PTSD from abuse, and a schizotypical personality disorder. So I've grown used to faking facial expressions to fit in. I thought maybe this dude had similar issues, because his face was not normal. He had a big friendly smile, right below a pair of absolutely dead eyes. "Hey, beautiful day out. Mind if I come in for a moment?" I kinda smiled back at him. No, Mum doesn't like me letting strangers in." "Oh." His smile got bigger. "Okay. How are you doing?" At this point I was starting to feel nervous. I shrugged. "Can't complain, I guess. Are you here to sell me something or tell me about God?" He shrugged back. "Oh, you know. Can I come in? Maybe talk to your mum?" I'll go get her. She's in the backyard." I moved to close the door and step back, not turning my back to the dude. Before I closed the door, he reached out and stopped the door. His fake smile was gone. His face was dead. "You're home alone. Your mum isn't in the backyard." I paused and swallowed hard. Then I pushed the door open again. "What do you want, man?" "To come inside. Please let me in." I reached over, quickly slid the knife out from under the blanket, and pointed it at him. "I'm not letting you in. Please, just leave." He looked at the knife, back up at me, and blinked rapidly. Then he affixed the smile to his face. "Oh, no problem. Bye." I watched him turn around and walk back down the street, until he turned the corner. Then I locked and bolted every door and window in the house, got the dog out of my mum's bedroom, and resumed my gaming. I then called my aunt's boyfriend, the only cop I trust, let him know what happened, and stayed on the phone with him until my mum got home from the doctor's office. She called around town, and found out a couple of other people had seen him walking and driving around, but no one knew who he was, and we were all on high alert for about a week. It's been about a month now, and no one in town has seen him since. He's just disappeared. So this happened to me on Thursday, April 25th, and I still can't shake off how terrifying and strange it was. So I was home alone getting ready for my midday college class that morning, and I opened my blinds to let some natural light in. I glanced out my window to see a man in his mid-30s wearing a baseball cap, roaming around my property, with his hands on his hips, walking around with a lot of weird confidence. But our yard is kind of like a cliff, and it looks over onto our 5 acres of property down below. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so it's a pretty scenic view. I was really confused, and thought maybe it was a worker that my mum had hired for our renovations on the house, who was admiring the view. I'm a little bit uncomfortable at this point, because the dude walks to the side of my house out of sight, I head upstairs to see him now roaming around my front yard and my driveway, looking at things, checking out my house, and he still hasn't seen me at this point. I call my dad and ask him if we have hired anyone to come by the house, and he says not that he knows of, and tells me he's going to call my mum and ask her, and then call me back. I'm waiting for the call when I notice this strange dude's car. It's a white Honda with no license plates, just parked parallel to my front door. The dude still hasn't seen me, and he's still wandering around, so I take this as an opportunity to remember that we have a security system and I armed it, so if he did try to break in, it would immediately alert the police. If this was some sort of professional or worker, he would have rung my doorbell or knocked at least once. He did neither. Just then I get a call back from my dad, saying neither him or my mum hired anyone to come by today, and that I need to call our local police station immediately. I went back downstairs after making sure to lock every door and window upstairs, and called my city's police station. I explained to a woman on the other end what is happening, and she decides that she's not going to send an officer out, and instead gives me a number to call their emergency dispatch line, and told me to talk to them. I call the number she gives me, and immediately I get an automated message saying, "Thank you for calling the non-emergency hotline. Nobody is available today to take your call. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911. At this point I'm really irritated, because 15 minutes had passed, and this weird dude is still lurking around my house while I'm home alone, and apparently that wasn't enough to warrant an emergency to the lady I called. I hung up and decided to call 911. After getting in touch with the 911 operator, I was asked a series of questions about his appearance before they would even alert officers near me to start heading towards my house. The whole thing really seemed weird. Nobody was in a hurry to have officers come up to my place when I was a young girl home alone with a strange dude. I asked the officer if I should stay on the line with her when she finally, after what seemed like forever, alerted the police to come to where I was, and she agreed, and I went back upstairs to check on the weird guy. And he's now sitting in his unplated Honda, either listening to the radio show extremely loud or on a phone call with someone through his car. It was a very prominent loud male voice coming from his car. Then all of a sudden, I heard the tone you hear when someone hangs up on you, and the operator was no longer on the line. I was really confused when my thoughts were interrupted by an unrecognized phone number calling me. I assumed it was the operator calling me back, so I picked up. Instead, I was greeted by really creepy heavy breathing. I'm not sure who, but it really freaked me out. I hung up immediately, dialed back 911. I had been pretty calm up until this point, but that phone call put me in panic mode. I got on the phone with another operator who already knew my situation and address before I could even explain it. She said the cops were on their way. 20 minutes had passed at this point. The dude is still here in his car and the cops are not. Keep in mind I live in a smaller town, so there's no reason why it took the cops as long as it did. Finally, this dude is leaving my driveway right as the cops pull up. They ask him a few questions. The cop then comes to my door and hands me a sketchy looking flyer saying it was just a landscaper. He said he had an appointment. I was really relieved and irritated that it was just a dude my mum had hired. I called my mum back and said the cop said it was just a landscaper that you hired and that he had an appointment. She goes, "I can assure you, we never hired a landscaper. We don't even need one." So creepy dude, who was posing to try and rob our house, let's not meet again. A few important things before I tell my story. Number 1. My kitchen has a big window next to a door. At the right side through the window, you can look at our backyard. It doesn't have a curtain. I always sit at our dinner table to work on school things, and stuff which is placed in front of a large window. 2. We have 2 Shih Tzu/Maltese mix dogs. They're very sweet, but they bark a lot when they hear something outside. 3. When this happened, I was home alone with my little brother of 13. And 4. My neighbours have a cat that walks around our house a lot. With that said, this is the story. A few months ago, my parents decided to go on a little holiday together for 2 days. My brother and I were fine with being home alone, and we didn't really want our grandparents to babysit us. My parents agreed, and they left that Saturday morning. The whole day was just normal. Everything went like it usually does. When it was about 11:30 p.m, my brother and I went upstairs to sleep. I put out the lights and locked the windows and doors, and everything seemed normal. Around 2 a.m, I woke up to the sound of my dogs barking loudly. They do this pretty often because of the neighbour's cat walking around our house. I thought nothing of it, and went back to sleep. Usually though, the dogs will cease their barking after 5 minutes, but they did not. I thought this was really weird, so I got out of bed and checked on my brother. He was still asleep. I chose not to wake him up and walked downstairs alone. I went down. My dogs were barking towards the large kitchen window, which wasn't that weird since the cats walked in our garden a lot too. I put a light on and walked around the kitchen to see if something was off. Everything seemed fine. I then checked if maybe my dogs were in pain or something, and they weren't. I then looked outside to see if the cat was walking around, but it was nowhere to be seen. This made me feel very uneasy. After this, I didn't feel like sleeping anymore, so I sat down at the dinner table to watch some YouTube and chill out for a bit. After about 10 minutes, I started to feel uneasy again. I had this weird feeling of being watched from the window. I thought it would be better to shut the lights off and go back upstairs, because I wasn't feeling safe. I grabbed a kitchen knife to protect myself if anything were about to happen. When I got upstairs, I checked on my brother again. He was still sleeping, and I sat in our hallway so I could hear things downstairs better. After a while, my dogs began barking again. At this point I was so scared that I was nearly in tears. I knew I had to call the police and then walk downstairs. The police told me they would be there in 15 minutes. I went downstairs as silently as I could. When I reached our hallway downstairs, I noticed that the lights by our front door were on. This only happens when people walk by, as they're sensor lights, but I stupidly shrugged it off as being our neighbour's cat. When I got back into the kitchen, my dogs were still barking. I turned on the lights and sat down, and not a minute later did I notice movement behind the large window in our garden. I just froze. I couldn't move. My dogs started barking like crazy, because they could see the movement too. A pretty large person was moving slowly towards the door. I still had the knife, but I was 15 and petite. The person looked a lot larger than me, and I surely couldn't win against him. He had to have seen me, because he started moving faster towards the door. Fortunately, at this point the police arrived. They knocked at the front door. I sprinted towards the door to let them in, and the man probably ran away, because when the police investigated the backyard, he was gone. Later, with the help of a police dog, the man was arrested and charged for attempted burglary. He apparently was arrested a few years ago because of attempted assault. My brother and I didn't get hurt, and everything turned out fine. but I'm still too scared to stay home alone. To the crazy man who tried to break into our house, let's not meet. In the summer of 1995, I was 11. Sleeping late home alone at around 10 to 11 a.m. while my parents were at work. I got woken up by the doorbell, so instinctively I hurried up down the corridor. But before I rushed to open the door as I normally would, I remembered the many times my mum scolded me for opening the door without asking, "Who is it?" first, or at least looking through the peephole to make sure that it was safe to open, especially after having some previous creepy experiences that have already taken place at this point. I ask, "Who is it?" But all I heard was some unintelligible mumble, so I brought a chair and stepped on it in order to look through the hole. We lived in an apartment building, and on the right of our door was the elevator, and then the staircase. Since the staircase windows were on the far left corner, there was not enough natural light to help me see who it was. I just saw a male with some colourful t-shirts standing outside. I repeated the question, and then strained to hear the answer. He said he was looking for Miss Spencer. That's my mother's maiden name. And I said she was at work. To give you some context, both of my parents are doctors. And I don't know if that sounds weird for the US or the rest of the Western world, but in Eastern Europe in the 90s, it wasn't uncommon for grateful patients to sometimes stop by, wanting to give thanks by bringing fresh fruit and vegetables from their garden, especially those which my parents had helped, but they couldn't pay. So the man said he was bringing something for my mum, except even in the murky light, I could see that his hands were empty. I asked where it was, and he said he left the package at the stairs. At this point, I'm starting to feel uneasy, that something isn't right. So I had to be cautious and lie and tell him I didn't have keys. I said my parents were at work and they told me to not open the door to strangers, so when they come back they can help him. He starts to get agitated and said he couldn't wait that long, and then says that he is actually bringing meat, so it would get spoiled in the heat if it's left outside. I start to hesitate because I'm thinking, well, what if he's telling the truth? Will I get in trouble for letting the meat spoil? But then I look through the spy hole again and see his hair, which means he has his ear pressed to the door listening in. That spooked me, and I said to him, "Sorry, I can't help you. Please go away and come back later when I'm not alone." He once again says that he does not have the time to come back, and he offers to leave and says he will leave the package at the stairs. So when he is gone, I will not be afraid to open the door and retrieve it myself. I keep quiet and intently observe him as he goes down the stairs and makes the noise of climbing down, and then I freeze, because in the silence that ensued, I was just about to really open the door and check, when I saw part of his t-shirt sleeve behind the corner of the stairs. He was hiding there, probably hoping I would open the door thinking he was gone, when in fact, he was preparing to do gosh knows what. Pounce on me? Break into the apartment? I got so scared, I froze and just kept on watching, standing on the chair behind the door. And finally, after what seemed like hours, but was probably no more than 10 minutes, I heard him really descend down the stairs. I didn't open the door. I called my mum's hospital, but she couldn't be put through. So I waited for them to come back home in the afternoon. They both got worried, but proud that this time I finally did the right thing. A few hours later, all the kids from the building and I were at the little square/playground area in front of it. It was buzzing with kids running around, so it was completely safe, and my best friend Nina and I were sitting on one of the benches, when suddenly a strange man approaches us and stands next to one of the benches. He says, "Are you Jemima?" I hesitantly confirm, although my heart starts to beat faster as I recognize the voice. It was the same man from the morning. This time I'm not alone, so I instinctively press myself closer to Nina when he says, "Well, I'm bringing something for your father, Matthew, but it's in the car, and I've parked it on the street. Come with me to help me bring it." Encouraged by my friend's presence and all the people around, I say to him that actually my dad is home, so if he waits there I'll go get him, and he could help him bring whatever he needs from the car, as I am little and can't carry anything heavy. The moment I said it, the guy quickly got quiet and walked away. Not running, just walking very briskly. My friend already knew what happened this morning, and I ran to my apartment, told my dad, and he ran in his shorts to chase after the guy. But of course there was no trace of him. My dad started asking away then, as once again something typical for Eastern European countries. The grandma sitting on the balconies and benches looking at everyone and everything going on, like a live security system. Nobody had noticed anything except one grandma, an old lady living alone on the first floor, who says that a guy approached her earlier while she was sitting on her balcony and started asking her about our family, then tried to ask her for money to pay for the meat he was bringing, as he told her that my parents had purchased it from him. She told him that she had no money, but stupidly gave him a lot of information like my name. We never heard anything about the guy, but thank God. Those questions are still puzzling me. What did he want? Why did he say my mum's name, but then said that he was bringing something for my dad? Was he actually focused on me? I hope that I never have to find out. I also remember that when school started after that summer, there was another situation that seemed weird and possibly dangerous. I was coming back from school and I saw my friends gathered in front of the apartment building, but in the entrance furthest away from the one I lived in. I was talking to them when I heard my mum calling me. I turned and saw she was heading to work, going towards the bus stop, but she called me to go to her, and when I did she told me that she wants me to immediately go back home. I grumbled but obliged, so from my point of view what happened was this. I reach our entrance of the building and open the door when I feel someone coming close behind me, but I don't turn and think nothing of it. Then I start climbing the stairs quickly, because I was afraid to take the elevator alone. But I heard that there were equally quick footsteps following me up the stairs, and just when I was fiddling for my keys about to unlock the door, I heard my mum's extremely worried voice shouting my name from downstairs, which startled me. But then the footsteps stopped right before the person reached my floor, and they started descending back. Then my mum climbs to our floor, hugs me, and we lock the door and she tells me what actually happened. She was going to work, but sees me talking to my friends. She then looks around and sees a creepy-looking man standing nearby staring at us, while we are all oblivious to his presence. So she calls my name and tells me to go home. She turns and starts for the bus stop, but then an impending sense of dread consumes her and she looks back, seeing that the guy is no longer where he was but actually now following me. And the moment she turns, she actually sees how I enter the building and he disappears a few seconds behind me. My mum starts running in sheer panic, then reaches the entrance and shouts my name, and then she hears his footsteps back down, and when she reaches the ground floor he passes her, but my mum said he gave her such an evil menacing glare, as if he wanted to strangle her for preventing his intentions or something. She said alarm bells rang in her head and her whole body was full of adrenaline, ready to fight if she must, because she felt I was in real danger. I was about 13. This was a good 5 years ago. I was at my friend's house, where I don't think I was supposed to be because I have strict parents. and we were hanging out. My friend is 2 years younger than me, but we grew up together, so for the most part everything was normal, until there was a knock at the door. Now, we were at her house alone, and were definitely not expecting anyone. I'm a pretty fearless person for the most part, who has no regard for her own safety, but a strong regard for the safety of others. I walked to the door and peered through the curtains. Past the door, there was a man in his late 30s, who was standing with a clipboard. His car wasn't in the driveway, but on the street by the house. No, scratch that. I know he saw me, because he began to speak. "I'm here to fix your cable." My friend on the stairs has had people come to do things like this before, but her parents have always told her when and if it was happening. Her face looked confused and utterly terrified. She isn't the bravest, but I did have a bad feeling about the guy. So by now I think, okay, don't open the door and he will leave. A rational idea, right? Well, at this point, the man kept knocking and knocking. The knocking then turned to banging. He must have been kicking the door too, because the sound was so loud and violent that I thought the door was going to break. She lived on such a busy street that I'm incredibly unsure how none of her neighbours that knew she was home alone at the time heard any of the commotion. Of course we panicked, but I knew I had to take control of the situation. My friend was in no state to move, let alone take the lead. I was 13 though, so I was out of my mind horrified. I snuck around to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I checked the back door and went to my friend who was sat on the stairs, as the stairs are between each door, but have walls that go down each side, so we were out of sight. When I got back to the stairs, the knocking stopped. My heartbeat seemed to have stopped too, because it sounded like the world became empty. The front doorknob began to turn as he tried to open the door, which was followed by more silence. After maybe 15 seconds, I heard something that I was definitely not happy to hear. Now you see, if I were an adult, there was no way this man would say anything like that to me, right? His tone was that of a crazed man, and it left me feeling as if every bone in my body suddenly turned to jello. Either way, we sat very still. A couple of minutes passed and we thought that we were in the clear. That's when I heard gentle pulling, followed by a loud banging on the backyard glass door. At this point I grabbed my friend and bring her upstairs. I grab the phone and we go to her mum's room to get into the closet. I call the police, feeling physically ill, and talk to the lady on the line. She questions us, and my friend had started crying. I answer her questions, and she tells me that someone's coming, and that I have to wait on the line. I feel like puking, but keep incredibly calm to ensure that my friend doesn't fall into a full-blown panic attack. She's known to get worked up easily, and couldn't keep her calm and take care of the situation at the same time. Eventually the banging stops, and I begin to breathe again. "Can you still hear him?" I answer the officer with a no, and she tells me that I should check to see if he's still there. She informs me to be quiet and careful. I slowly climb down the stairs and peek at the back door. No one's out there. I walk to the front and step into the room with a window and basically crawl to it. When I peek my head over, I see the man sitting on the stairs outside on his phone. This just sends me into a frenzy, so I respond in a panic that he is. She tells me to go back and hide, and the police are very close. Eventually, after a long time, there's banging on the door again. This time it ends quickly. A nice lady officer calls to us from outside saying we can come out. We go downstairs and see a male officer talking to the man, while the woman comforts us. Apparently the man works for the cable company, and was informed to go around back if no one was home and let himself in. I think anyone can see the flaw in his alibi, but he had a clipboard and had God knows what on it, and the police checked and let him go. The woman told us she believed us and not him, but there wasn't much else they could do. I'd hate to think what could have happened had the man got in. I chalked it down to a cable guy that's really passionate about his work, but now I have to accept that it's most likely not the case. I hate to think that people like him who clearly have bad intentions get away so easily. Maybe I could understand if we lived in a bad neighborhood, but where we lived had always been so incredibly safe. In 2014, I was home alone. My then boyfriend, now husband, was at work, as I happened to have a very rare day off. I was watching The Golden Girls as I snuggled our 2 cats and relaxed. I remember feeling a strange, dreadful feeling. I sat up from the couch and noticed a man with shaggy and greasy long hair. He seemed to make eye contact, even though he was roughly 2 blocks away. Then he suddenly broke out in a sprint. I felt this moment in every inch of my body. I rushed into the front porch and locked the screen door before rushing back into the house and locking the main door leading into the house. He was suddenly at the side of our house, punching and kicking the side window of our home as he screamed inaudible screams. Either that, or he was opening his mouth and not making sounds. I don't know which is more terrifying. I was shocked as I stared at him. Suddenly, he lunged off to the side and I realized that the side door might have also been unlocked. I ran to our side door and caught it right as I saw his face appear in the tiny door window. I began to cry and locked it before running into our spare bedroom, whipped out my cell phone and dialed 911 as I cried and tried to explain the issue. For some reason, the story in my memory skips to my upstairs neighbor calling me about 5 minutes later, asking if I'm okay, and me saying, "Do you think I'm okay?" He begins telling me what happened after I hid. Apparently the man had run up to his apartment and knocked calmly, so he answered. He had no way of knowing that the person at his door was not of sound mind, and I had not thought to warn him. He opened the door, leaving only a thin screen between him and this man. He asked the man if everything was okay, to which the man began screaming, "They're trying to kill me. Help." He was shocked and backed up, saying, "Please step back, I will call the police." By then, he was downstairs, dialing already. The man punched his door and ran downstairs, kicking and punching his car in the driveway as he screamed about being chased and on the verge of being murdered. He pulled at the car doors and punched at the windows as he screamed, and I begged for the police to arrive faster. The police showed up as the man was still fighting with the neighbor's car. They had brought along an ambulance and took the man away, strapped him in a stretcher in the back, and we never looked back. This happened very recently. So we've been only living here for a few months, and my window is the only window out of the entire house that has a view of the backyard, and it's also right next to our very squeaky back door, meaning I always hear when someone comes in and out. So my family went out to run errands last night, leaving me home alone trying to catch up on my classes, because college life. Well, it was going good for the first hour, until I hear the back gate open and shut, and at first I thought, oh, they must be back, thinking of my family, but that thought was immediately gone when I remembered we have a front door, and there's no reason for them to come in through the back. So I sit as still as I possibly can and listen. I start to hear the sound of crunching leaves, like someone is stepping on them, but I can also hear they are trying to move slowly. At this point, they are right under my window, and I know this because we have a couch located right underneath it, and I hear someone actually sit on it and let out a grunt, which also lets me find out it's a man who's doing this, and I'm feeling extremely grateful over my paranoia of having my blinds open. It's at this point that I'm completely freaking out, not being able to move at all because there was literally someone sitting under my window. And I sit there motionless for 2 minutes until I start hearing a tapping on the window. They started out light. With each set of taps he added more weight to them, and I can feel my eyes grow even wider, and immediately feel like I'm going to pass out, but I still can't move. It's like I'm paralyzed with fear, and it still keeps on going, the constant tapping, until I finally snap out of it, and immediately, without shoes, and I'm just in shorts and a tank top, do I jump up, grab my keys and run out the front door into 30-degree weather at night, which in my defense was definitely not the smartest thing to do, as who knows if he was alone. Someone could have easily just been at the front door the moment I got out, but I didn't care, and I didn't even feel cold. I just needed to leave. I hopped into my car and drove off, and parked at a Walmart nearby and sat there in shock, not even believing that had actually happened. I finally picked up my phone and see my hands are shaking visibly, but I managed to call my parents, and as soon as I heard my dad's voice I burst into tears. I wasn't even able to tell him anything, and it wasn't until about 5 minutes later that they show up in the parking lot, and I calmed down enough to tell them what happened. Then we went back home. I was terrified to go back, and even waited in the car until my dad came back from the backyard after inspecting it, and said that whoever there was gone. We also debated about calling the police, but I honestly don't think anything would have been done. Just file a report since I didn't even see his face, and he was probably long gone by now. But I'm really regretting it, because I'm still terrified and don't even feel safe in my own home. I've been trying to distract myself all day now, but I'm so shaken up, I'm just hoping I can forget about this whole ordeal. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed those stories for tonight. If you're home alone, well done for making it all the way through. I'm sure there's no one at your windows now. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and press the bell icon if you are new, or if you just haven't done it already. As I mentioned at the start, my wife launched a video and our friend launched a video featuring me and my wife trying some vegan food and comparing it to non-vegan food. It's a really interesting video, and it's a collaboration with my wife, and if you watch it, I mean, you'll get to see my face if you haven't seen it before. And you know, it really is a fun video, and a nice way to end an evening of horrors, if you are so inclined. Oh, there they are. The links are on screen right now. So feel free to check them out, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.